Thank you, Cindy. And in keeping with that spirit of Let's Roll America, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon. Many of you certainly know the name. If you've lived in North Carolina for any period of time, I just got to tell you that there are few people in politics in North Carolina that have had such an impact on the direction of this state and served it in so many different capacities. Our next speaker is former Secretary of State and Attorney General from North Carolina, Mr. Rufus Edmisten. He was born and raised up in the mountains in Boone, earned his undergraduate in political science at UNC Chapel Hill, and got his law degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where he served on the Law Review. During law school, he joined the Capitol Hill staff of North Carolina Senator Sam Ervin, and in 1973 to 74, he was the staff counsel for the Senate Watergate Committee. He saw firsthand history in the making in this country. It was the first time in history that a congressional committee served a subpoena on a sitting president, and he was one of the two that actually got to serve the subpoena. Following Senator Ervin's retirement in 1974, he returned to North Carolina. He was elected our Attorney General in 1974 and served in that post for 10 years. During that time, he engaged in a successful effort to prevent the damming of the scenic New River. He launched a variety of legislative efforts such as securing victims' rights, enhancing the state's historic preservation laws, and setting new educational standards for the state's law enforcement personnel. He was a Democratic nominee for governor in 1984, losing to Governor Jim Martin. And after his unsuccessful campaign, he practiced law with Reagan H. Weaver for 4 years. In the 88 and 1992 elections, he won the office of Secretary of State. As Secretary of State, obviously he applied his vast knowledge to helping improve the business climate in North Carolina and worked personally to help craft and establish limited liability corporations under North Carolina law. He's filled several key roles in private organizations outside of his legal practice. He runs a charity in North Carolina called the Foundation for Good Business, Extra Special Super Kids, and I know he's going to tell you a little bit more about that. The Super Kids program provides college scholarships to underprivileged high school students who wish to pursue higher learning. He has served on the NC Capital Foundation for over 25 years, including a 6-year stint as president. He is a member of the board of directors of the Julia Crump Foundation and Project Enlightenment, both of which are charitable organizations that seek to enhance educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth. Rufus also serves as a board member for the Raleigh region of Capital Bank, and he and his wife Linda live here in Raleigh in a designated historic landmark house built in 1921. Please welcome our neighbor, your friend and mine, Mr. Rufus Edmisten.
I'll tell you, that's worth the trip over here. And by the way, Major Dave is a graduate of one of my classes called the Institute of Political Leadership. And the first time I ever talked to him, I got all messed up and I said, I'm very glad to be here before the the PLO. And I got a little bit confused there. But it's a great organization that's nonpartisan. You have people from all walks of life. And let me introduce a friend of mine here. You might have run across him before. His name is Chris Emanuel. He crisscrossed this state with Governor McCrory time and time again. And I know all about that because I crisscrossed the state 1,000 times with Senator Sam Ervin. Now this is very special to me today because I think Major Dave is quite a fellow. He knows how to disagree but not be disagreeable. And that is what we lack today in our political discourse all over this country. I can stand here and tell you about all the things that I think are wrong and right, but I want to tell you what I think is good about America. I get so tired of negative, negative, negative. Now, I view the Constitution as a document that keeps powers away from the government. I was taught by Senator Ervin that that government, which governs least, governs best. And every time you turn around, somebody in government somewhere is trying to do something that they tell you that it's good for you. Well, when you hear that, it's like someone saying, I have good news for you, and they've really got bad news. Now, there are some things, though, that bother me as we have this 226th anniversary of the drafting of that wonderful thing called the Constitution. We've got some constitutional hypocrites in this country. They want to use the Constitution when it suits their beliefs and discard it when it doesn't. Now, I was taught by Senator Sam Ervin that the Constitution means what it says. And you start with the separation of powers. They were pretty smart in that separation of powers business, because they knew that if you entrust the government in the hands of one body of the government, that you lose freedom. And we've had these episodes in history where one branch was superior to the other, and they never worked out right for the country. And my friend Major Dave mentioned Watergate. I think that Richard Nixon could have been a great presidency had he not surrounded himself with people that had no knowledge whatsoever about our United States Constitution, or they would have been doing the stupid things they did. Now, Watergate's a good example, though, my friends, of how this document works. Yes, I did take the subpoena down there that day. It was 40 years ago, on July the 4th. And if you want to have a good history of that, go up here to the Museum of History this afternoon. On your way back, go through there, and there's a Watergate exhibit. And I want you to walk through there and say, oh my goodness, Rufus looks just like today like he did back then. Now, that's all I ask you to do. And you'll see this nice looking fellow sitting between Senator Ervin and Senator Baker, and I want you to say that yourself. My, how he looks the same. Well, Watergate showed that the Founding Fathers were very bright. They knew that if you didn't separate the powers, that tyranny would arise. So the day in August of 1974, I believe it was, when Richard Nixon left office, if you'll notice, our country did not crumble. We did not turn into a banana republic. It moved on because those wise Founding Fathers had established a government where the checks and balances worked. Now, let me tell you some things I think have been happening that are dangerous. And you can't call me a liberal or conservative or anything. I'm a constitutionalist. And I try not to be a hypocrite about the Constitution. And when I was Attorney General, I tried my best for us to honor the things that this Constitution said we do. Now, let me give you a couple examples, and you may disagree with me, but that's what freedom's all about. I think one of the worst decisions the court's ever handed down was that case called Citizens United, where big business, labor unions, and anybody else can give unfettered amounts of money to candidates, and we don't know where it came from, how much it was, or who they are. That is corrupting. That takes away democracy, in my opinion. And if you want to watch it, just look at recent elections of both parties where they've depended on this sort of tomfoolery about the electoral process. Let me tell you another decision that I find absolutely abhorrent. It was called the Kello case. Came out of Connecticut. They ruled that the government can take your property by condemnation and give it to private people. Now, if that's not wrong, then I'm an elephant or a donkey. Whichever's worse, I don't know. In that case, what needs to happen is that North Carolina needs to get busy and pass a constitutional amendment here that says that never again can that happen in North Carolina as long as we're a state of the Union. I think it digs at the whole absolute root of our country that you can take away private property under eminent domain and then let a private company have it and claim that that's for the public good. And let me tell you what it was up there in Connecticut. It was a piece of property they took from all these people who'd lived in this area for years. They built their homes there. They raised their children there. And then they took it away from them and gave it to a big company that was going to develop a big, beautiful, tacky shopping center. Well, you know what? They never built a thing there. To this day, there's nothing there, and they ran those people out of their homes. Now, that to me is a degradation and a violation of the Constitution beyond anything you've ever seen, because our Constitution says you may not take away a person's private property unless you do it for a public purpose, like a road or something else of that nature. So you have to be eternally vigilant. You have to be like you are to take your time off, come out here, no matter what the size of the crowd. And that's why I am very much in awe of people like Major Dave, who on this day want to organize a group of people to hear about our Constitution. And I am one who believes that the Constitution's greatest attribute is that it gives every American the right to make a fool of themselves. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Rufus. You know, it dawned on me while he was speaking, as I alluded to earlier, our sense of morality exists regardless of what type of government we have or what type of constitution we have. Our sense of godliness exists regardless of our constitution and our government. There are things that bind us all together as people that affect us and how we deal with each other on a daily basis that has nothing to do with our government. So we need to recognize government for the limited purpose for which it was originally intended, and in doing so, step up and fulfill our obligations as citizens.